Geek Show podcast network covering the good, the bad and the inexplicable in movies starring by or about pop stars. No, the Pop podcast covers such a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from science fiction to documentaries, from country to hip-hop. I'm Graham Williamson, film critic for the Geek Show and Horrified, and this week I've been joined by...
Mark Harrison. I'm a film writer and occasional quizmaster on filmstories.co.uk, vodzilla.co and various other outlets.
Now, this week we're travelling back to 2012, a time when a lot of people worried about the apocalypse, so 8 years out, but never mind. And one of the most bizarre portents of the end times was that a film starring Kylie Minogue had won an award at the Cannes Film Festival. Then people saw it and realised that was one of the least bizarre things about it. Mark and I have been brought here this week in celebration of the beauty of the act that is Leos Carax's Holy Motors. So, I mean, where can we possibly start? I kind of want to start with the film itself before Kylieing, because a lot of people will have seen this bizarre film because Kylie Minogue is in it. I am such a ponce that I had the opposite journey. I watched it because it was a new film from the director of Polar X, and it led me eventually to become an ardent fan of the underground recording artiste, the chanteuse that it introduced me to, which is one Miss Kylie Minogue.
Wow, so it's a way in for you.
Yeah. You know what it's like with
That's
Kylie.
good.
Everyone talks about needing an entry point into her work, and this was mine.
Yeah. So, I had one of those things where I didn't know she was in it at all until I saw the film. This was when I was taking the bus to the Tyneside cinema and watching 3 or 4 films in a day. I can't remember what I watched this with, but I doubt it was anything like as unique. I mean, wow. I mean, I should really try and find out what it was that I watched at the same time as this. I know it was very likely another foreign film, but like this blew me away. It was one of my favorite films of that year, and I still don't understand it at all. I have theories. We'll get into those.
Well, to describe it as baldly as possible, it begins with a man played by the director Leos Carax finding a hidden door in his apartment. He unlocks it with a key that grows out of his finger. Yeah, look, if you haven't seen the film, you're going to have to get along with a lot more than this. And he walks into a cinema where everyone is asleep and there is a big good boy walking down the aisle. And then it ditches that entirely. It starts off again in this modernist house where a very kind of yuppie-looking guy called Monsieur Oscar, played by the miracle, the Fortean event that is Denis Lavant, is going to work in a big limousine driven by Celine, his driver, played by Edith Scobb, who has worked with Buñuel and just hundreds of people, but is still probably most famous as the plastic surgery patient in Eyes Without a Face. And as they drive, we become aware that this persona that Monsieur Oscar has, this sort of hard-edged, middle-aged businessman, is literally that. It is a persona. He unpeels it and puts on another disguise of an elderly homeless woman, and he goes out and he acts as her for a bit. And for 9 more episodes, he goes across France in this limousine, playing a series of parts, sometimes with no obvious audience, sometimes interacting with people who we assume are not actors, sometimes interacting with people who definitely are other actors, including Eva, played by Kylie Minogue. At least twice he gets murdered and he just sort of walks it off.
Yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. I mean, with that opening, with that opening bumper, it's like you sort of see, all right, okay, so this is a metaphorical reading on it's about cinema and it's about the art of cinema, and that's the thing. And in interviews, he's gone, no, it's not that. It's well, what am I supposed to read it as? There's that. I mean, there are layers to this. It isn't straightforwardly anything. It's not a straightforward film at all. What it is incredibly. I mean, I'll say cinematic, even though it's not about cinema. You know, it's like the thing of the dreamlike opening of like going into the cinema to watch the film that we're watching is like fairly, you know, the Muppet movie opens in a similar way. That's maybe the most normal thing that happens. My question to you is this: what is Monsieur Oscar's job? Do you reckon he is an actor, or do you reckon he is something a bit more existentially troubling?
Well, it's funny because this is one of the things that I wanted to say about the movie is that I've watched it, I think, 4 times now, maybe more, maybe 5, and every time I see it, there seems to be a different reading in it, and I'm not sure whether it's because it's a complex text, although it is, but it could just be that I change and the world changes, and what I think keeps on coming to me the last couple of times I've watched it is that Leos Carax has actually beat Ken Loach to be the first person to make a film about the gig economy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how I was reading it. I did look at it with the like on my most recent reviewing. It's I watched it earlier this week for this podcast, and it's coming back to again. It's thinking about how I looked at it at the time. I think I saw it twice in the cinema. Yeah, I must have seen it twice in the cinema. And on the second viewing, I have a theory that I'm still nursing. I don't know if it still stands or not, but I'll get into that as we get more into the film. But it's the experience of it is incredible. But you start to look at it, as you say, it gets murdered twice.
Yeah.
It's really just like, and he just rolls on to the next thing. It's looking at him going through it as a voyeur, as you know, as a sort of the omniscient viewer, and then looking at how other people are reacting to him, whether they acknowledge that they are too going from one role to a next, that they are, that there's visible machinery in between each episode. You know, this is essentially just like an anthology film, but the difference is in between you see the actor going through emotions and going, right, well, what are we doing now? it's and the whole of it is overwhelming. So I think maybe we maybe need to go through bit by bit with this one.
Yeah, should we do that? Because the first one is the beggar scene, which I think is essentially just to get you warmed up to the idea. I don't think there's really any extra resonance in that idea. It's just as far as you can get from how we're introduced to Monsieur Oscar to let you know that this guy completely changes shape.
Yeah, and it is at this juncture that I should say I didn't know going in what this was about. So you see a guy going from being, you know, from being told work hard, dad, and then going and being an investment banker / arms dealer / whatever he's doing in the limo, to dressing up as a woman and begging. It's like, oh, okay.
So he goes from there to one of the most spectacular scenes, which involves him dressing up in a motion capture suit. And I should actually say the first time I heard about this movie was when I was following news from Cannes, and there was someone who watched it and then tweeted a lot of stuff that happened. And there is something about having someone baldly tell you. Also, then he stops being a beggar and he dresses in a mocap suit so he can have sex with a CGI dragon. That really does impress on you what kind of film this is.
I mean, the location of that, the long lead up to him going in front of the green screen and being in the suit with the little balls on it is is, is where you start to think, all right, so it's comments. If you're still thinking it's a film about cinema, you idiots, then you look at it like it's you're looking at the industrial complex where he is. It's not a place, it's not a movie studio. It's a giant like chemical plant or something that he's sort of walking into. Um, there's a transitional bit with a skywalk where there's someone walking in the other direction. That's the closest it looks to, say, like a Hollywood studio backlot, as opposed to somewhere, as opposed to ICI.
Yeah.
and he finds himself in this place doing this thing that like they made this post Avatar. So again, you're thinking commentary on cinema. Really, it's the taking of his movement. And God, as you say, Denis Lavant is a miraculous actor. Like the physicality of that scene, what he's doing.
Yeah.
To look at
Incredible.
him. Yeah, and by the end of that sequence, before he moves off in the limo again, you see the rendered version of what it's going to be, and it looks. There's nothing extraordinary about a giant CGI creature contorting itself like that. But you've
Yeah.
watched him do his thing where he's fighting and he's firing a gun and he's running on a treadmill. There's like could oddly prescient for when it was made, because as I said, just kind of post Avatar, but looking at it 10 years on, all it's really missing is a big CGI Thanos brain him on the other side
Yes.
of him, like doing the motions of like swinging around like Captain America style and that kind of thing. And it's again where you sort of think, all right, I'm getting a handle on this. So he's an actor, it's commentary on acting, and then the next sequence happens.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was going to ask you is, are there any sequences where you think the people he is interacting with are definitely not other actors or whatever it is that he's doing? Because this is one of the ones where I think there are obviously some people he meets here who are on the outside of this weird world he's in. This is where he plays the role of Monsieur Merde, a character that Lavant and Carax had previously used as the middle section of their contribution to the anthology film Tokyo, which also features contributions from Bong Joon-ho and Michael Gondry. Kylie collaborator Michael Gondry, all connects. He is a green-suited, red-bearded sort of goblin type man who lives in the sewers, never talks but makes a series of bizarre whimpering noises. In Tokyo, his role was essentially to be a sort of Godzilla parody. It was Godzilla, but with this little sort of rather sort of pitiable weird old man instead of Godzilla. And in this, he becomes sort of a Beauty and the Beast character. It's a very different monster movie. He kidnaps a model called KM, played by Eva Mendes, and takes her to his lair in the sewers.
My question on that is, if this is a scene where there are other people in it who are definitely not actors, then she doesn't seem particularly relaxed in the situation by the end of it, and where he leaves her before he goes off to the next appointment. Yeah, this is the point in my original viewing of it where I just decided to relax, just to see what happened, and then stopped trying to figure out what it was and just enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I've seen him described as a satyr in when I've been reading around this. It is that sort of thing of him kidnapping a woman. He assaults another young woman, bites her finger off, and then lovingly licks blood up Eva Mendes' armpits, all while there's this sort of photographer who's just like thrilled that this is happening, and it makes me wonder whether that bit's candid or not. There's another detail you pointed out to me. I was reading what you've written about before, in the gravestones in the scene, in that scene in the cemetery.
Which the gravestones, which all say, rather than a name or a date of death, they say visit my website and then have a hyperlink beneath it.
Yeah.
So coupled with the factory that makes CGI before it, you've got another kind of a link in here that this is a movie about post-physicality, that all of the things that used to be solid and real, like factories and tombstones, are now digitizing.
Yeah, it's straight. I mean, you mentioned the Godzilla connection. I love the Godzilla music in that scene as well as you go through. So that's distracting, but I did pick up on it this time, the URLs on the gravestones, and it does later on feed back into the theme, but it's again 180 degrees away from what the next appointment is.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pleasures of placing the Monsieur Murd scene here is that it is the most overtly comedic of the set pieces, and maybe that's why you had that reaction where you thought, all right, yeah, I can just
Yeah,
enjoy this. Yeah.
yeah. All right, it's a funny one. Yeah.
Yeah. The next one I think is still funny, but it's a different sort of funny. This reminded me a bit of like Turn of the Millennium, Chris Morris, when he was doing Blue Jam and Jam,
Yeah.
that he plays a father who picks up his teenage daughter from a party, and as they drive home, they have a conversation that fits the exact mood of a sort of conversation that a disappointed dad would have with a wayward daughter, but is instead about her spending all of the party crying in the bathroom rather than being out socializing and getting drunk like he wants. And it's kind of, on one level, it's simple reversal of expectations gag, but there is something kind of ominous and slowed down to it that makes it work within this film.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, the film is a series of skits, as we say, interconnected by theme and by the scenes in the limo. Just him suddenly being this, this chain smoking dad who is talking to his daughter and all this. So it does have the ring of like something from like an early noughties BBC Three late night sketch show about it. But it does get pretty real at the end, just thematically linking to the thing of him chiding the daughter for being shy, for asking to get picked up early, then for lying about it. And the line he says to her that really struck me is, "Your punishment is to be you."
Yes.
Yeah, again, it links into what he's doing, is that he escapes his couch and everything, but it's just grim. Again, it's as a punchline line goes, it's sort of a bit real.
So that's interesting, though, because presumably, as you say, it is a really harsh punchline, but it also implies that she is inescapably herself, that she cannot change identity like he can, which just kind of raise the question of why she doesn't recognize that her dad is some weirdo who she's never met before.
Yeah. And that she doesn't seem to question it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go through all 9 in finger quotes 9 of these, and then get on to what my theory is. But
fair enough.
But coming out of that, your punishment is to be you. It's like, oh wow, where they're going to go with this next, and where they go is interval. Wow.
They have a clip from a very early filmmaker called Etienne Jules Maillet, who was one of the pioneers of cinema in the 19th century, of someone stretching their hands before playing the piano. And then, as that clip so expertly implies, Monsieur Oscar goes into a church with a gang of accordionists who come out of nowhere and play an all accordion cover of Let My Baby Ride by R.L. Burnside.
I had that stuck in my head for so long. Like, even on the way home from the cinema, I did, and for so long afterwards.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it lasts maybe 2 or 3 minutes of him leading this band through. There's occasional break from him, a shout, "Toi, neuf, mate," and then and then out, and but you don't see him go. You don't see him get out of the limo or get back into the limo on either side of it. I don't think, right?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
No, so I'm not counting that as one of the 9 jobs.
No.
No.
And if, according to Wikipedia, which did such a sterling job recapping the plot to yesterday, if you've heard our episode on that, listeners, according to Wikipedia, it is not one of the 9 jobs. The 5th job is the one where he plays a gangster who is assigned to murder a man who looks identical to him. It succeeds, but also goes wrong in that the guy manages to get some good stabs in as well, and it is left unclear which version of Monsieur Oscar has returned to the limousine.
Here's where my thing starts to kick in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you count that as 1 job or 2?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think, but I'm really glad that Wikipedia has counted this, because every time I watch this, I think I'm definitely going to count the jobs this time, and I just get lost.
Yeah, well, here's where I'm headed with this. We'll get through to the end and then I'll count, because I think there's one more than 9, and I think that one of these is potentially his real life.
Okay, okay.
I think that's. I mean, and I think maybe the daughter one that we've already talked about. We'll count them up properly as I have got them here. I disagree with Wikipedia because it doesn't count them. It doesn't count the guy who kills and the guy. When it leaves identical corpses at the end of that sequence, it doesn't count them as two jobs. It counts them as one.
Yeah.
So that's where I question it.
So he goes, he has a brief conversation with Mikhail Piccoli in the limousine, who accuses him of getting tired and not keeping up with new technology.
That's why he has that line, though, isn't it? If I miss the cameras, I miss being able to see the cameras, which again speaks so much to the theme of it.
Yeah. And in the sixth sequence, the sixth sequence at first appears to be just a random thing he's doing, but it turn out to be a job. He puts on a balaclava, runs out and shoots a banker who looks, it must be said, very similar to the banker that he was playing at the start of the film, implying that character has some sort of independent life.
It took me a few viewings to notice that.
Me too.
That he essentially kills himself from the beginning. And again, it's another read. I mean, it's again also the only way you know that's a job. There are a few things like this where you're not sure if it's a job or not. The only way you know it's a job is that he dies at the end and again walks it off. So that's a bit of a tip off. And you sort of get Celine involved in that as well, where it's almost like he's made a mistake, and it's almost like he's just gone to the wrong set. Like in the terms of like acting. It would be like, I don't know, let's say Christian Bale suddenly turning up on a Terminator set and going mental and shouting at everybody, and everybody being so embarrassed they decide, all right, he's John Connor now, which is what I assume happened with Terminator Salvation. That's my theory anyway.
Celine is a lovely character. I think it would be very easy to just make her a standard exposition dispenser, but I think Edith Scobb has a presence that is simultaneously elegant and barking mad in this movie that I really like a lot. But then the next job, which according to Wikipedia is job 7, he is an elderly man on his deathbed who is comforting a woman who appears to be his niece in what seems like a return to the kind of family relationship territory of the father and daughter job. Then at the end, it's revealed that the niece is another person working in whatever Oscar's line of work is, the first other person in this line of work we have seen in the film, and they just sort of congratulate each other on having done a good job and leave.
Yeah, in the sketch, in like sort of the skits type structure of it all, there is, it's never as much as it gets into some very deep stuff, but it is always funny. There's something funny in every single one, and then weirdly with this one, the thing that's funny is the reveal that it's not this serious thing. It is played fairly straight right up until that point, and the subversion there leads nicely into the next one as well, the next appointment.
Yeah. The next appointment is with another person who is in Oscar's line of work called Eva, who is played by Kylie Minogue. They meet at the La Samaritaine building, which is a huge abandoned department store in Paris. She tells him that she has an appointment as an air hostess, that seems to be one of her jobs in the way that Oscar has jobs. They talk about the 20 years that they've known each other. She sings a song co-written by Leos Carax and Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy, and at the end of it she jumps from the top of La Samaritaine and apparently kills herself, which it sort of saddens Oscar, although it doesn't sadden her as much as if she was actually dead. You assume she will leave and go to be this air hostess, but I have some theories about the meaning of this, but I will throw the floor to you for a second.
Well, first of all, on the song, I've found out it was co-written by Neil Hannon just quite recently, and when you listen to it back, in the best way, it sounds like it. It really does sound like he's channeling through Kylie. It's very much one of his. It's a beautiful sequence. It's again the thing that blows your hair back, even like 7 or 8 different weird, unrelated things into this film.
Yeah.
It's just so strikingly beautiful and sad. It's another one of those where, you do know at this point that it's not. This is the other one that I think could possibly be a real thing. Even
Yeah.
if you understand that by the end of it, she is going to walk it off. That
Mm.
this isn't the ninth appointment. Or where are we up to on the Wikipedia things? Is it eight?
They say that's 8. Yeah.
Yeah, but I still think the murderer and the victim are
A
two
2.
separate ones, which is what, by my count. So this is essentially like it's sort of between jobs to me. This one is
Yeah.
that like the way that ends isn't part of their interaction with each other. It's part of her next job, and
Mm.
that beautiful musical sequence. Even though you wouldn't necessarily burst into music, we don't know what the rules are governing these insane people,
Yes.
transitory people who are living lives all over the shop.
Yeah.
It's beautifully well done. I mean, it's played like he just sort of crashes into a limo, like Celine crashes into her limo, so it is
Mm.
just played as a chance encounter. And they have this interaction that's like there's this again, it's a subversion that she all the way through. She's sort of styled after Jean Seberg,
Mm.
and but with blonde hair as Kylie has.
Yeah.
And the question he asks her is that your hair? And she says, no, not yet, because there's this job coming around.
Yes.
They've got 20 minutes to recap the last 20 years, as they say. The beautiful line, I'm an air hostess living her last night tonight, as a elevator pitch of what existential thing she's about to jump into.
Mm.
It's the sequence that encapsulates me. I understand why Kylie's, and obviously for the purposes of this podcast, why Kylie's involvement is such a focal point for it, because this to me is the film, and
Yeah.
it seems to be independent of the rigmarole, the appointments that he's got going on the rest of the film.
I think there is probably something very true about that. It makes, although we have seen Oscar sort of improvise long-term relationships with people and bluff them before, it makes a certain degree of sense that if one of these people living this life needs to have a personal relationship, it should be with someone who's doing the same insane job. So yeah, I think it could be real. There are also a lot of references to Carax himself here. La Samaritan also featured in Lavant de Point Neuf, which was his 3rd film, I believe. And it was, it's a great film. It really holds up. It was infamously a fiasco during production. It went massively over budget. Part of the reason why he makes films so intermittently, he's made 2 since, with a 3rd ready to go. Part of the reason why he makes films so intermittently is in part because the failure commercially of Lavant de Point Neuf caused people to go very cold on him. The other thing is that this film is dedicated to Ekaterina Golubeva, the actress who is the mother of Carax's son, just as Eva is the mother of Oscar's son, she says. And she died about just over a year before this film came out. It's never been clarified what of. It may have been suicide. I feel, frankly, icky speculating. But
Yeah.
as I say, the film is dedicated to her. It begins with Carax himself waking up alone in 2 beds that have been pushed together. At the Cannes premiere, Carax described cinema as a beautiful island with a very big cemetery. I think there is this theme of death going through it, and even if Carax did not go into this thinking, I will make a film to help me deal with Ekaterina's death, I think that has to be on his mind. It can't not be on his mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's when that happened, he did drop what film he was developing and move on to this. And yeah, I think that going back to is it about cinema? It can be, but I think it is more about death than it's about these characters going from one thing to another. That's inevitably going to be in there. And I think speaking to that as well, I didn't know about this background to it until I was reading around for this. So again, that's another reading on this film that really opens it up.
Yeah.
The other thing I read in research is he was doing an interview with the Guardian, which goes nicely. It leaves the interviewer a lot to do because he's a little bit.
He's very withdrawn, isn't he, Leos Carax?
Yeah. He early on in the interview he says like, I don't work with people who ask me questions, which is the problem with me talking to you. But but it's later on in it he says that he made whether it's this film or films in general, he says you sort of make films for dead people and then show them to living people, which really struck me. Again, looking at it, revisiting it now, it really opens it up.
So then we get to what Wikipedia claim is his 9th job. I remember when I watched this, I felt like this was maybe his real life, but then I find it impossible to count the jobs.
Wouldn't it be amazing if it was?
This is why I want it to be his real life.
Just goes home and have as a normal one.
Yeah. Yeah. Celine says that as a reward after all of that, he will be sent home to a loving family, all of whom turn out to be chimpanzees.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
That's the scene. Yeah.
And it is so much played as him going home at the end of a long day. But he's like, does he have hair in that one? Does he have a wig on in that one? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. I think the chimpanzees were kind of pulling my focus, to be fair.
Yeah, in fairness, yeah. Because it is, again, as I said, there's something funny in everyone. And in this one, again, it is a big punchline. It is a thing of like, yeah, of course the family. Of course the loving family. There's a pair of chimps. Like, all right, again, I'd really love to find out what it was that I saw the same day as this, but I probably don't remember it because I was still thinking about all of this, really.
Yeah, what the hell could he watch that would match up? Yeah.
So there's an epilogue after we leave Monsieur Oscar.
Celine drives the limo that she's been driving back to the warehouse that has Holy Motors emblazoned on the front. It's their company. And it's full of identical limousines. She puts on a mask that is similar to the one she wore in Eyes Without a Face, locks up, leaves for the night, and as you would expect, the limousines then start talking to each other.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And sort of musing upon, similarly to how earlier in the film they're talking about the cameras not being visible anymore. It's a thing that, I mean, that if it cements the limo as this metaphor for a giant visible machine, something that's designed to draw attention, that we are now bored of seeing. Maybe the kind
the
of
infrastructure is invisible now. Yeah,
and it prizes that, whether it's the motion capture sequence where it's about erasing the movement that did it and projecting it onto something else to make you go, how'd they do that? So whether it's there's violence and there's there's violence and other acts going on all the way through this film from someone who is essentially, as you say, Graham, just in the gig economy. Yeah. Just passing on from one thing to the next, apparently with no ill effect, just walking off, whether it's death or emotional turmoil, or watching someone they love fall from the top of a department store. Yes. Watching Kylie fall from the top of a department store. We all relate. We all relate to that. But it's fascinating to me, endlessly so. It's worth noting, you mentioned about Edith Scobbin, the Eyes Without a Face thing. She was cast apparently because Carax already felt that the film owed a debt to Eyes Without a Face. Yeah. So that was a deliberate reference, apparently.
It was that, and he cast her somewhere in the middle of the unbelievably protracted shoot of Les Armand du Point Neuf, and most of her role hit the cutting room floor, and he'd always felt quite bad about that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there's parts of it that are self-referential, but I never feel like it's indulgently self-referential. It is always the work of someone who wants to entertain you, to make you laugh, to make you cry, to do all those traditional things that films are meant to do. It looks gorgeous, I must say. Yeah. So it's got a large amount of surface pleasures. It just jumbles them up in this way that you haven't seen before.
I mean, structurally, it doesn't seem to have much interest in being a film on the surface of it. But but the fact that you can get this much out of it on a first viewing and then on subsequent viewings, and then the more you know about it, the sadder it is, or the funnier it is, or the more interesting it is. Yeah. It does really hold up. It's not just a thing of like, what does it all mean? Upon rewatching it, this would be unbearable if it was any less entertaining than it is, and instead, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. I think the other thing about interpreting its meaning is if you assume that someone is hiring Monsieur Oscar to do these things, and they do seem to be part of some kind of company, it makes you think about what the jobs that we deem important are. That Monsieur Oscar's repertoire includes assassinations, movie special effects, and giving teenage girls anxiety complexes about how they behave at parties.
Yeah,
And that these are the sort of essential functions of a modern capitalist society, apparently. I think there's a degree of satire towards that.
yeah. And with the gig economy side of it, yeah, just the fact that no one's doing this, no one's specializing in looking after their daughter, or
Yeah.
rather, badly looking after their daughter. No one's specializing on in licking blood on Eva Mendes' armpits, unless
Although, you know,
These Hollywood types. You never know.
Eva Mendes was a real surprise when she was revealed to be in this because she was riding pretty high at the time as a Hollywood star. She'd done some art house things before, but more on the kind of the level of something like James Gray's We Own the Night, which is on one level an auteur film harking back to the 70s New Hollywood, on another level it's a crime thriller in it. So
Yeah.
seeing her in something that is so exuberantly mad was very surprising.
Well, a credit immediately before this is a post-credit scene in Fast Five, reprising a character from Too Fast, Too Furious. She's since not shown up again in the franchise, but but yeah, she's kind of retired from acting now. But she's good in this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's surprising to see her show up, but it's another one of those things where when you get, if not, it's not like crossover hit type material, but if you get like festival favorite like this was, coming with some hype, the
Yeah.
angle publicity wise is always going to be Kylie and Eva Mendes rather than the guy who says I don't answer questions. so there's that.
And also, can you say with certainty that Holy Motors isn't part of the Fast and Furious extended universe?
That would be incredible. Yeah, what we need is that Eva Mendes turns up in another post-credit sequence, and this time the cars are talking to each other. Oh, of course it is. Fast and Furious presents Holy Motors.
So yeah, I mean, that is all incredible. And listeners, if you come away from this podcast with one thing, it is that you should watch Holy Motors, even if it doesn't sound like your sort of thing. I have so many friends who were not into art house cinema at all who have come away raving about this because it is a delightful and beautiful film. But part of what we're here to talk about is, of course, not just the cinematic merit of the film, it's the fact that it contains Kylie Minogue.
I mean, as at the time of recording, Kylie's been in the news because she's become the first female artist to achieve 5 UK #1 albums in 5 consecutive decades, which is impressive going for someone who's still about 29, 31 tops.
Yes. Yeah.
Pretty good.
Because I do a lot of research for these, as I know you do as well, and sometimes the process of researching can be quite similar to a kind of Stockholm syndrome, where you go in not having any particular interest in an artist, and then you become a fan just because you've spent hours watching clips of them on YouTube. But I think with Kylie, it is something slightly deeper. I really loved that she turned up in this film, and I quite like it when she turns up in any film because I think it's just a delightful little unusual thing. But I realised the extent to which the story of my life and the story of anyone's life, if you're under about 40, can be mapped out in Kylie Minogue songs.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, what was your sort of Kylie feelings before this? What was your take on her?
From music perspective or acting wise?
Well, let's start from the acting because the acting CV is quite small, and I have a theory about why that would be. But let's talk about that because she did start off as an actress. I did think initially that I wasn't going to cover anyone who started off acting and then went into singing, but I think with Kylie, the singing side and the acclaim she's got as a singer has eclipsed her acting so thoroughly that it
Yeah.
is completely fair to talk about her as a singer.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, she started out in Neighbours,
Yeah,
and then kind of this pop career massively. The stock well, Aiken and Waterhouse years
Mm.
leading into this, as we say, a career that now spans 5 consecutive decades. And when she was in Holy Motors, I did, in reading around this, I did see her say she doesn't want it, she made this film because she doesn't want it to be weird she's turning up in a film, was her position on it. She wanted to sort of get back into acting because it's a career that's sort of cut short by the massive singing career. For
Yeah.
me, acting wise, the big thing is always going to be Doctor Who, because it always is for me.
Yes.
But she's in the 2007 Christmas special Voyage of the Damned, where she and David Tennant team up to try and stop a space Titanic from crashing into the Earth. Pretty standard Christmas fare. It was not without reason the most viewed episode of Doctor Who on first broadcast since it was revived. It pulled in like something like 13 million viewers consolidated on Christmas Day, and it's partly because it's Christmas. It's probably mostly because it's Kylie, let's be fair, and it's at the peak of the David Tennant era. She's great in that. And Doctor Who fans being Doctor Who fans, there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth about the kind of stunt casting that they did in the 1980s when it was announced that Australia's pop princess is going to ruin Doctor Who. But she's great in it. She's have a set with some like one-off companions and specials. The Christmas specials normally find David Tennant moping. They usually find the Doctor moping full stop, coming as they do after a series finale. And she's in the scheme of this massive disaster movie type thing. She's extremely likable. I mention that because, having said what she said around the time of Holy Motors, that she didn't want it to be unusual to see her in a film. The next, the big film that she was in after that was San Andreas, where I remember her specifically in a not very memorable film. This was the Dwayne Johnson earthquake movie.
Yeah.
It was somebody's fault. Hey, but she is the character who is horrible. She's in it for 5 minutes and dies horribly.
Right.
Like so she thoroughly earns her like terrible death in this collapsing building. And it was just such a weird thing that of all the people to cast, they cast Kylie Minogue to harass Carla Gugino about her dead daughter. And then when pulled on it, said, "Well, I didn't mean it like that," and then die horribly because earthquakes are starting. So it's a weird sort of acting career that she's had. That she's one of the biggest stars in the world, but not so much for acting. You think she'd be in more? Yeah.
I would love to see him in more things. I think the reason why the acting career became secondary is because my theory is if you are a pop star who acts, you can do credible stuff. Yes, you can disappear into a part. You can absolutely hit that point where it does not, as she says, feel weird that you have turned up in a film.
Yeah.
But it has to be keyed into your music career in some way. Part of the reason why David Bowie has such a legendary film career is because while he is very good and transformative, even in his best roles, they all make sense as part of his musical journey. He becomes, very alienated in America. He makes The Man Who Fell to Earth. He goes through a mainstream phase and does a lot of pop records. He stars in a Jim Henson movie. He retires from live performance and becomes a more mysterious figure. He plays Nikola Tesla. There's a degree of congruence where even if it isn't planned, it shows that the same mind is picking out these scripts as is making these albums. And Kylie's never had that. I mean, she's made a lot of traditional kind of cheesy pop star movies like Biodome and Street Fighter. But the strange thing is they didn't come in her Stock Aitken and Waterman years. They came in the mid-90s when she was trying to establish herself as a more lasting, more experimental artist.
Yeah. On Bowie, if ever anyone took a limo to different stages of their own life, it would be Bowie, really, with different personas. But on Kylie, I guess what I'm saying is I'm surprised she hasn't been in more things off the back of Doctor Who. But then I say that about most people who are regulars or guest stars in Doctor Who.
Yeah. But I think this is maybe the point where you can look at a film that Kylie did and look at her musical career and spot some sort of connection. I mean, other than, obviously, I guess when she was doing Neighbours, there's a link there because obviously someone saw her in Neighbours and thought, oh yeah, she'd be a good pop star. But beyond that, you have this very sort of dark experimental film where she sings this tragic ballad. And in the same year, she celebrated her 25th year in show business by making an album at Abbey Road, where she did stripped back and orchestral reworkings of some of the most famous songs.
Yeah.
So for the first time, there's a Kylie album and a Kylie movie where they feel like part of the same phase. I often think that because people often read pop stars in terms of the eras that they're in, people overlook Kylie's movies because if you're trying to assess the Confide with Me years, there is, thank God, no reason to watch Biodome. So that's my theory anyway. You mentioned seeing her in that very strange role in San Andreas. I would like to go for another another very strange role she did. Did you know that she worked with Sam Taylor Johnson?
Wow, what was that for?
Back when Sam Taylor Johnson was primarily a video artist and she hadn't done Nowhere Boy yet, they did a short called Misfit, which involved Kylie topless but with her back to the camera and with this pixie cut that is, I mean, it's not the same as the one that she has in Holy Motors, but it's Step on the Journey. And she is looking over her shoulder and lip syncing to the last ever recording of a castrati. So it ticks a number of boxes on your Sam Taylor Johnson bingo card. You've got the interest in celebrity, you've got the interest in gender and sexuality. And I remember at the time it was broadcast on late night BBC Two at the time when British television occasionally used to show interesting things at night. And there was a lot of fuss about it because all of the papers went, see Kylie topless on BBC Two. And you think, well, technically, yeah, but I can't help thinking if you're watching it for that reason, you are going to be utterly miserable. But it's on YouTube now and it's well worth digging out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be it, hasn't it? It's got to be, especially the UK press, it's kind of tied to a showbiz type thing. It's good that that interview that I read, there was kind of like, you know, her admitting that she'd need to see the film, she'd need to see Holy Motors again in order to understand it. It's the fact that it's funny, but it's not depressing, and that it's about everything. And that seeking it out in order to do something completely different is the mark of like really interesting artists. And again, where have the roles been since? That's what I'm wondering about. What is, I mean, looking at the IMDb thing, I didn't know if it was going to be either way, whether Swinging Safari was going to be either like a sex comedy or like one of those really low market sort of redubbed animated CG films that look like crap. and have the voice of Kylie Minogue and James Corden and Griff Rhys Jones and the Honey Monster, you know, just like random people off UK TV.
I did see the trailer for Swinging Safari. It's from Stephen Elliott, who directed The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Right.
The trailer sells it as a coming-of-age movie set in the 70s. It does look very broad, but I think less broad than, you know, you would think an Australian comedy called Swinging Safari would be. So I don't know, it might be good. I don't think it's come out here, which is kind of astonishing when you think that Kylie is now basically we've adopted her as a national icon. You know, we've accepted her so completely.
Yeah, I've seen films with lesser stars still make it onto like the £7 shelf at Asda. Completely. Like, kind of like turn up with a giant picture of the star on the front saying, see this person, whether it, you know, no matter how much they're in the film.
Yes.
Just, to sell a film on a celebrity who's in it.
But I think also part of what I got from the research project is just realizing that I loved Kylie Minogue in general. I think she has a remarkable discography. I think she has a loyalty towards a gay fan base that is really touching, particularly since it came long before every female pop star sort of needed to court the gay market. I think, you know, there is a difference in doing it now where it's not unwelcome, but there is a difference doing it now and doing it when Section 28 was still an actual law. I think she seems remarkably unaffected by having had this insane career. I think one of the things that really impressed it upon people how much we love Kylie is when she had that breast cancer scare, and it
Yeah.
did make people suddenly think about her in terms of more than just, oh, I think she's sexy, I like her records, I think she seems like fun. It forced people to actually think, oh God, what would a world without Kylie Minogue be like?
I mean, I don't think it's going far to say, especially since she's topped the charts so recently. And when Disco was announced, it was a thing of like, oh, finally something in 2020
Yes.
has gone right. I don't think it's going far, it's like too far to say that she is at this point the best artist at her level.
Completely.
There's no one else who hasn't done a little bit of crap every once in a while. You know what I mean? There's not someone who's just turning out. I don't know. If she turned around and did a Christmas album, it would be a really good Christmas album.
She did, and it was.
Yeah. See what I mean, though? But yeah, if she just, I mean, as much as like the latest thing she's on is that Children in Need official single where she contributes vocals to a cover of Stop Crying Your Heart Out, which is like, I can't not hear Oasis is sarcastic at this point. So like that as a charity single was a bit blah. But that's for charity, and that's as near as you'll get to a crap record. I think.
Yes. Yeah. And, I think that for all her film career has taken a perhaps necessary backseat to music, she has quietly managed to work with a lot of interesting directors. Carax, Taylor Johnson. She's worked with Michael Gondry, of course, on the video for Come Into My World.
Yeah.
So, she's racked up a pretty decent hit list. And I would like to think that as sort of time goes on, she will appear in more films because it seems to be a natural place for someone who has her combination of major star wattage and immediate likability.
Yeah. I mean, you've made me think by mentioning Bowie, they're still pressing ahead with doing that Labyrinth 2. And if they wanted to make me interested in Labyrinth 2, just say Kylie Minogue's going to be in it. There you go, go down that line. Just whatever it takes to make Kylie more Bowie in terms of filmography and credits. Yeah, I'll take it. But, in a film with so much else going on, she stands out so much in Holy Motors that sequence, there was, I was reading around that this was originally pitched to Juliette Binoche as a role to play and then completely restructured when they didn't, apparently their exes in real life, Carax and Juliette Binoche, and they didn't get on. That didn't pan out, so it was completely rewritten for Kylie, like who was supposed to go do a Claire Denis film at some point. Again, where's the Claire Denis film? That's Kylie.
Well, that's the thing, because Carax said that the main reason why he spoke to Kylie Minogue in the first place was because Claire Denis encouraged him to. And I learned many years later that this was, as you say, because of an unmade film. Like you, I would love to see Kylie Minogue in a Claire Denis film. But part of me kind of wished it wasn't. Part of me wished that, Claire Denis just sits at home listening to Better the Devil You Know once she knocks off work.
It's to be hoped, yes.
But Carax said the only Kylie Minogue song he knew when he started on this was her duet with Nick Cave, which feels like an authentically Leos Carax thing to happen, I think. Yeah. But then she turns up again in a film that I really hope we will cover on Pop Screen at some point in the future. She turns up in the back of another car in Nick Cave's documentary 20,000 Days on Earth.
Right.
Just a couple of years later, which again is a really, really interesting film that has a Kylie Minogue appearance that stands out even in the midst of a load of other wonderful things. But yeah, I think that's I say that's covered it. I'm sure when I watch Holy Motors again, I'll think it's about something else.
Yeah, we could come back this time tomorrow and do another hour, probably on the film and on Kylie, maybe.
Yes,
I'm glad that you've kind of got into it, Stockholm syndrome or not. I'm glad you've got the appreciation from reading around, because I don't see life such as it is in Holy Motors is fleeting and it jumps from one thing to the next. But the main thing we learn is that life's too short to pretend you don't like Kylie Minogue.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, co-sign that, and I am very happy making that our final statement.
Yeah. I'm going to have to get going anyway because I've got to go to another podcast where I play someone who doesn't like Holy Motors and then someone is going to come in and kill me at some point.
Yes.
Car's outside, so I will have to nip off.
So yes, that's been your lot for this week, listeners. Until next week, I've been Graham Williamson.
I've been Mark, or have I?
Or has he?
I have. I've been
Yes.
Mark.
And we'll see you next week with more Pop Screen.